Burn it if he won't sell. The order came low and casual, like it didn't matter, like the land beneath their boots was already gone. Engines cut one by one, and silence rolled across the dry Texas air, thick as dust. 300 men stepped out, spreading wide across the open acres, their shadows stretching long in the early morning light. The ranch sat still in the middle of it all, weathered wood, rusted hinges, a porch that had seen too many summers to count. And there, by the gate, stood Marcus Hale. He didn't reach for anything, didn't square up, didn't even blink. His hand rested against the old cedar post, fingers brushing over a set of initials carved deep into the grain decades ago. MH, and just below it, another set, smaller, rougher. His father's hands had made that mark. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of dry grass and engine oil. Boots pressed into gravel as a path opened through the crowd. Richard Voss stepped forward, polished shoes out of place on dirt that didn't belong to him. He adjusted his cuff, glanced once at the house, then back at Marcus like he was measuring something already decided. "You had your chance," Voss said, voice calm, almost bored. "I offered you more money than this place will ever see again." Marcus didn't answer right away. His thumb traced the carved line in the wood, slow, steady, like he was reading something only he could understand. The sun crept higher, catching the edge of his face, revealing nothing but stillness. "Not for sale," he said finally, quiet, flat, like the words had been waiting there for years. A ripple moved through the men behind Voss, not loud, just a shift, a weight adjusting. Voss let out a small breath through his nose, something close to a laugh, but not quite. "You're standing alone on 40 acres surrounded by people who don't ask twice," he said. "That usually changes a man's mind." Marcus lifted his eyes then, not sharp, not aggressive, just clear. The kind of look that didn't need to prove anything. For a second, it held longer than expected. Long enough for something unspoken to pass through the air and land somewhere Voss didn't like. "You ever wonder why I didn't leave?" Marcus asked, almost conversational, like they were two neighbors talking over a fence. Voss didn't answer. He didn't need to. The question wasn't for him. It lingered anyway. A truck door slammed somewhere off to the side. A chain rattled. The edge of a fence line bent under pressure, wood creaking but not breaking yet. Marcus didn't turn, didn't react. His hand stayed on the post, grounding him to something older than the men, older than the money, older than whatever deal Voss thought he controlled. The air felt tighter now, like a storm that hadn't decided if it would break. Voss stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal. "Everything has a price." Marcus's lips pressed into the faintest hint of a smile, not amused, not mocking, just certain. "That's where you're wrong," he said softly. And somewhere far off, almost too faint to notice at first, a distant thrum began to rise, low and steady, cutting through the silence like something that had already been set in motion long before this morning ever began. The sound grew clearer, no longer just a vibration in the distance, but a steady rhythm cutting through the morning air, low and mechanical, like something that did not belong to this quiet stretch of land. A few of the men shifted, glancing over their shoulders, trying to place it, but the horizon still looked empty, just flat fields stretching out under a pale sky. Marcus did not look up. His hand slid down the cedar post, stopping at the base where the wood met the dry earth, and for a moment, his fingers pressed into the dust, as if confirming something was still there. Behind him, the porch creaked softly in the heat, the screen door tapping once against its frame, a familiar sound that did not match the tension gathering around it. Richard Voss followed the direction of the distant hum, his jaw tightening slightly, not fear, not yet, just irritation at something he had not accounted for. "You expecting someone?" he asked, voice sharper now, the calm starting to thin. Marcus straightened slowly, brushing the dust from his palm against his jeans, movements unhurried, deliberate, like time worked differently for him. "No," he said, then paused just long enough for the word to settle. "But they have been expecting me." The line did not land the way Voss wanted it to. It hung there, incomplete, like a puzzle missing one piece. A man near the trucks lifted a hand to shade his eyes, squinting toward the far ridge. "You hear that?" he muttered to no one in particular. The sound deepened, layered now, more than one source, echoing across the open land in a way that made it hard to tell how far away it really was. Voss took a step back without realizing it, his polished shoe pressing into the dirt, leaving a mark that looked out of place the second it formed. "This is private property," he said, louder this time, as if volume alone could reassert control. "Whatever you think you are doing, it ends here." Marcus turned his head slightly, just enough to glance past the line of men, past the broken edge of the fence where Wood leaned at an angle but still held. His eyes tracked something invisible for a second, then returned to Voss, calm, steady, unchanged. "It started here," he said quietly. "That is different." The wind picked up, carrying a faint ripple through the dry grass, and with it, a shadow flickered across the ground, fast and gone before most of the men noticed. One of them did, though, and his posture stiffened, his head tilting upward, following something just out of frame. Another shadow passed, slower this time, stretching longer across the ranch house roof before sliding away. The hum was no longer distant. It was above them now, layered and precise, controlled. Voss looked up, finally, his eyes narrowing against the light, and whatever he saw there made him go still in a way that had nothing to do with choice. Marcus did not follow his gaze. He did not need to. Instead, he stepped back from the gate, just one pace, enough to put the carved initials fully in the light, the wood glowing warm against the rising sun. His voice, when it came again, was almost quiet enough to miss, but it carried anyway. "You should have asked why I stayed." And this time, no one laughed. The air shifted the moment the first helicopter broke through the low morning haze, not loud in a chaotic way, but controlled, measured, the kind of sound that carried intention instead of noise. It hovered just high enough to cast a wide shadow across the ranch, the spinning blades cutting sunlight into fragments that moved across the ground like slow waves. Then another followed, and another, forming a quiet perimeter in the sky that no one had planned for. The men on the ground looked up now, not all at once, but one by one, as realization spread without words. This was not random. This was not luck. This had been set long before any truck rolled onto this land. Richard Voss stood still, his shoulders tightening as he tracked the movement above, calculating, recalculating, searching for control that was no longer there. "You called them," he said, but it sounded less like an accusation and more like a question he already feared the answer to. Marcus shook his head once, slow, certain. "No," he said. "I told you. They have been expecting me." The difference settled heavily between them. A second helicopter angled slightly, lowering just enough for its presence to feel closer, more personal, the wind from its blades brushing the tops of the dry grass, bending them in one direction like something invisible passing through. No one moved to resist. No one stepped forward. Even the men who had arrived with confidence now held their ground differently. Weight shifted back, hands no longer as certain. Marcus turned away from Voss for the first time, not as an escape, but as a choice, his gaze dropping to a patch of earth just inside the gate, a place that looked no different from the rest unless you knew where to look. He walked toward it, each step even, unhurried, as if the presence above had nothing to do with what he was about to do next. The dirt there was slightly darker, compacted in a way that did not match the surrounding ground. He crouched, pressing his palm against it, feeling for something beneath the surface. Behind him, Voss took a step forward, then stopped, caught between command and hesitation. "What is this?" he demanded, but his voice lacked the authority it carried before. Marcus did not answer. Instead, his fingers dug into the edge of the soil, not aggressively, just enough to loosen what had been buried with intention. The ground gave way slowly, revealing the corner of something metallic beneath the dust, dull and worn but intact. A few of the men leaned in slightly, curiosity overriding instinct for a brief second. The helicopters held position, steady, patient, like they were waiting for this exact moment. Marcus cleared more of the dirt away, exposing the lid of a small metal box, edges sealed, surface scratched by time, but not by neglect. He paused with his hand resting on it, eyes closed for just a fraction of a second, as if acknowledging something that did not belong to anyone else standing there. When he opened it, the hinge creaked softly, a quiet sound that somehow carried more weight than the engines above. Inside, neatly placed, were a set of worn dog tags, a folded map marked with precise lines and coordinates, and beneath them, something else that caught the light differently, something that did not belong to the past alone. Marcus lifted the map first, letting it unfold just enough for the markings to show, the lines intersecting directly across the land they stood on. Voss stepped closer now despite himself, eyes narrowing as recognition flickered, faint at first, then sharper. "That is not possible," he said under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. Marcus looked up at him then, calm as ever, the same stillness that had never left his posture. "It is," he replied quietly. And for the first time since the trucks arrived, the ground beneath Voss's certainty began to shift in a way he could not control. The map did not flutter in the wind. It stayed steady in Marcus's hands, heavy with something more than paper, the edges worn but the lines sharp, deliberate, intersecting the ranch in a pattern that did not belong to chance. The helicopters above held their position, unmoving now, like they had found exactly what they came for. Richard Voss stared at the markings, his eyes tracing the coordinates, the grid, the symbols that only meant something if you had seen them before. And the moment it clicked, it showed, not in panic, but in the way his expression tightened just enough to lose its polish. "This land," he said slowly, choosing each word like it might change the outcome if he said it right, "was never listed." Marcus did not respond immediately. He folded the map once, precise, careful, as if every crease mattered, then set it gently on the open lid of the metal box. The dog tags beneath caught the light again, faintly, their worn edges reflecting years that no one here had witnessed. One of the men behind Voss shifted, glancing between the helicopters and the ground, the confidence from earlier now replaced with something quieter, something uncertain. "You bought everything around it," Marcus said finally, his voice calm, steady, the same tone he had held from the start. "Every acre you could see." He looked up then, meeting Voss's eyes without pressure, without challenge, just fact. But not this. The wind picked up again, lifting a thin layer of dust that moved across the ground like a veil, soft but persistent. Voss exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance, trying to reassemble control from pieces that no longer fit together the same way. "There are records," he said, almost defensively now. "There are always records." Marcus gave a small nod, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. "There were," he said. The distinction landed harder than it sounded. A faint movement came from above, one of the helicopters shifting position just enough to align directly over the ranch house, the shadow tightening, focusing. No spotlight, no announcement, just presence. One of the men near the trucks lowered his head slightly, as if instinct told him to step back even when no one had said a word. Marcus reached into the box again, this time lifting the dog tags, the chain slipping through his fingers with a soft metallic sound that seemed too quiet for the moment, but carried anyway. He looked at them for a second, not long, just enough to anchor something inside himself, then let them rest against his palm. "This place was used," he continued, his voice even, controlled, not revealing more than necessary. "Not publicly, not officially, but it mattered." Voss's jaw tightened. "And you think that changes anything?" he asked, but the question felt thinner now, like it was missing the weight it needed. Marcus tilted his head slightly, considering, then shook it once. "No," he said. "It already did." Another pause settled, longer this time, stretching across the open space between them, filled only by the low, steady hum above. Voss looked around, taking in the men he had brought, the land he thought he owned, the sky that no longer belonged to him in this moment. The equation had changed, and he knew it, even if he had not said it out loud yet. Marcus closed the metal box slowly, the latch clicking into place with a finality that did not need to be explained. Then he stood, brushing the last of the dust from his hands, and stepped back toward the gate, placing himself once again beside the carved cedar post, exactly where he had started. Nothing about his posture had changed. Nothing about his expression had shifted, but the space around him had. And for the first time since sunrise, Richard Voss had no move left that felt certain. No one gave an order, but the shift was undeniable. It started at the edges, small, almost invisible. A man near the trucks took half a step back, then another. Not fear, not panic, just instinct adjusting to something that no longer felt right. The helicopters did not move, yet everything beneath them did. Richard Voss stood still for a moment longer, his eyes moving from the closed metal box to the carved post, then to Marcus, as if trying to find a version of this moment that still belonged to him. It was not there. "You think this stops anything?" he said finally, but the words lacked force, like they had already lost the argument before being spoken. Marcus rested his hand again on the cedar post, fingers settling into the grooves that had been there longer than any contract, longer than any offer. "It already did," he replied, the same quiet certainty, unchanged. The wind carried that sentence across the open land, and no one interrupted it. Voss looked past Marcus then, scanning the ranch as if seeing it for the first time, not as an asset, not as a transaction, but as something he had misread entirely. The house, the fence, the uneven ground, the way the light hit the wood just right. None of it fit into numbers anymore. Behind him, the men he had brought stood differently now, no longer forming a tight line, no longer pressing forward. Some glanced at each other, waiting for direction that did not come. Others simply stood still, as if stepping forward would mean crossing into something they did not understand. A faint click came from above, not loud, just enough to signal that whatever was watching had not left, had not even considered leaving. Voss exhaled, long and controlled, then adjusted his jacket, a small gesture that felt more like habit than confidence. "There are ways to resolve this," he said, trying again, softer now, measured. "We can revisit the terms." Marcus shook his head once, not dismissive, just final. It was never about terms. The difference landed heavier than anything else that had been said. For a moment, Voss did not respond. He simply stood there, the space around him larger now, emptier, as if the ground itself had stepped back. Then he nodded, once, almost to himself, a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted beyond negotiation. He turned slightly, looking toward the trucks, toward the men waiting for a signal that no longer existed. His hand lifted halfway, then stopped, hovering, uncertain. The gesture faded before it became anything. One by one, without instruction, the men began to move back, slow, controlled, the same way they had arrived, but without the same weight. Doors opened. Engines started, softer this time, less certain. The line that had surrounded the ranch began to loosen, then break, leaving space where there had been none. Marcus did not watch them go. His attention stayed on the post, on the ground beneath it, on something that did not require an audience. The helicopters remained for a moment longer, steady, patient. Then one shifted, rising slightly, followed by the others, their shadows pulling back inch by inch until the light returned fully to the land. Voss lingered a second longer than the rest, his gaze fixed on Marcus, searching for something that had already been answered. "You could have sold," he said quietly, almost a statement now, not a challenge. Marcus nodded once, acknowledging the truth without agreeing to it. "I could have," he said. A pause followed, not tense, not heavy, just real. Voss looked down briefly, then back up, and whatever he had come here to prove was no longer in his eyes. He turned without another word and walked back toward his vehicle, each step slower than the last, until the door closed behind him and the engine carried him away with the rest. The dust settled gradually, the sound of tires fading into the distance, leaving only the quiet that had always belonged here. Marcus remained by the gate, hand resting against the carved initials, the wood warm under the rising sun. He did not move. He did not need to. And in that stillness, the land felt exactly as it had before anyone ever tried to take it. The silence did not rush back in. It settled slowly, like dust after a long drive, drifting through the open space until it felt natural again, like it had never been interrupted. Marcus remained where he was, his hand still resting on the cedar post, feeling the grooves beneath his fingers, the edges worn smooth by years that no one else had counted. The sun climbed higher, warming the wood, pulling a faint scent from it that mixed with the dry earth and the distant trace of engine oil fading away. He let out a breath he had been holding longer than he realized, not heavy, not relieved, just steady, controlled, like everything else about him. The sky above cleared as the last helicopter pulled back, its sound thinning into the distance until it became nothing more than a memory carried by the wind. For a moment, Marcus did not move. Then slowly, he stepped away from the gate and walked back toward the spot where the metal box had been opened. The ground there was still disturbed, darker than the rest, a small reminder of what had been hidden beneath it. He crouched again, brushing his hand over the soil, smoothing it out, pressing it back into place as if restoring something that had only been borrowed for a moment. The box sat beside him, closed now, quiet, holding what it needed to hold without explanation. He picked it up, feeling its weight settle into his hands, familiar in a way that did not need words. Behind him, the ranch creaked softly, the porch shifting with the heat, the screen door tapping once more, the same rhythm as before, unchanged. He walked up the steps, each one giving slightly under his boots, the sound grounding, real. Inside, the air was cooler, carrying the faint smell of old wood, and something clean, something cared for. He set the metal box on a small table near the window where the light fell just right, not too bright, not hidden either. For a second, he stood there, looking at it, not opening it again, just acknowledging its presence. His eyes moved to the wall, where a faded photograph hung slightly off-center. A man stood in it, younger, strong, a quiet smile that did not need to prove anything. The same eyes, the same stillness. Marcus reached up and adjusted the frame, straightening it just enough. "Still here," he said under his breath, the words barely audible, not meant for anyone else. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the soft rustle of grass across the land, uninterrupted now. The fences, though bent in places, still stood. The barn, though marked by the morning, remained. Nothing was perfect, but nothing was gone either. Marcus stepped back out onto the porch, letting the sunlight fall across his shoulders, warming the fabric of his shirt, grounding him back into the moment. He looked out over the acres, not scanning for threats, not measuring value, just seeing it as it was. 40 acres of dry land, uneven, imperfect, but rooted in something that could not be listed, could not be bought, could not be replaced. His hand found the railing, fingers curling lightly around the edge, the wood warm and steady beneath his grip. For a long second, nothing moved. No engines, no voices, just the quiet rhythm of wind and light. Then, almost imperceptibly, Marcus nodded once to himself, a small, final motion, like closing a chapter that had never needed an audience. He turned back toward the door, stepping inside without hurry, leaving the land exactly as it had always been, unchanged in the only way that mattered. The house settled into its rhythm again, each small sound returning like it had been, waiting just beyond the edge of the morning. The soft tick of the old clock on the wall, the faint creak of wood adjusting under heat, the distant call of something unseen moving through the fields. Marcus stood just inside the doorway for a moment longer, letting the quiet fill the space where tension had been. His eyes moved once across the room, slow, deliberate, taking in the details that never changed. The worn chair by the window, the boots set neatly by the door, the metal box resting where he had placed it, catching a thin line of sunlight that shifted inch by inch across its surface. He walked toward it without hurry, each step measured, like the distance mattered. When he reached the table, he did not open it right away. His hand hovered above the lid for a second, then lowered, fingers resting flat against the cool metal. The temperature had not changed. It never did. He exhaled quietly, then lifted the latch, the soft click echoing in the stillness more than it should have. Inside, everything remained exactly as he left it. The dog tags lay coiled, the chain slightly twisted, the metal worn smooth by time and touch. The folded map sat beneath them, edges precise, holding lines that still connected past to present in a way no one else could see. Marcus picked up the dog tags first, letting them slip through his fingers until they rested in his palm. He did not rush it. The weight was familiar, grounding. For a brief moment, his eyes closed, not in memory, not in regret, just in recognition. Then he set them back carefully, exactly where they belonged. Outside, the wind shifted again, brushing lightly against the walls, carrying the scent of sun-warmed dirt through the open window. It felt different now, not because anything had changed, but because something had ended. Marcus unfolded the map halfway, just enough to see the center markings, the lines crossing the exact spot where the ranch stood. His finger traced one of them slowly, following it to the edge, then stopping. He did not need to see more. He already knew the rest. A faint sound reached him then, not from outside, but from deeper within the house. A soft vibration, almost imperceptible at first. He turned his head slightly, listening. It came again, steady this time. A phone, resting on the far counter, lighting up against the dim interior. Marcus did not move immediately. He watched it for a second, the glow reflecting faintly against the wall, waiting. When it did not stop, he crossed the room and picked it up, the screen already active, a number he did not need to recognize to understand. He answered without hesitation, bringing it to his ear. "Hail," he said, voice calm, even. There was a pause on the other end, not empty, just measured. Then a voice, low, controlled, carrying the same kind of precision he knew well. "We saw everything," it said. Marcus did not respond right away. His gaze drifted back toward the window, toward the land stretching out beyond it, unchanged, quiet, still his. "I figured you would," he replied. Another pause followed, shorter this time. "The site is still active," the voice continued. It was never fully cleared. Marcus's expression did not shift, but something in his posture settled deeper, like a piece fitting into place. His eyes moved back to the metal box, still open on the table, its contents exposed to the light. "I know," he said quietly. The voice on the other end exhaled softly, almost like acknowledgement. "Then you understand what comes next." Marcus looked out once more, the wind moving through the grass in long, slow waves, uninterrupted. His grip on the phone tightened just slightly, not from tension, but from decision. "Yeah," he said, steady as ever. "I do." And for the first time since the trucks had arrived, the quiet around him did not feel like an ending. It felt like something beginning again. The line went quiet, but Marcus did not pull the phone away. He stood there, listening to the silence on the other end like it still had something to say. Then the call ended with a soft click, clean, final, leaving only the faint hum of the house behind it. He lowered the phone slowly and set it back on the counter, screen going dark as if nothing had happened. But something had. The air felt different now, not heavier, not lighter, just more defined, like the edges of everything had sharpened. Marcus turned back toward the table, toward the open metal box, and this time he did not hesitate. He folded the map completely, aligning each crease with care, then slid it beneath the dog tags again, restoring the order that had held for years. The lid remained open for a second longer, the contents catching the light one last time before he closed it with a quiet click. He did not latch it yet. Instead, he lifted the box and carried it toward the back door. The wood floor beneath his boots gave the same familiar sound with each step, steady, grounded. When he pushed the door open, the sunlight hit stronger now, higher in the sky, casting shorter shadows across the yard. The land stretched out in front of him, still and endless. The same 40 acres that had just held more than anyone else understood. He stepped off the porch and walked toward the same patch of ground, the one he had smoothed over minutes ago. The dirt still held the faint outline of where the box had been, but it was already fading, blending back into everything else. Marcus crouched again, placing the metal box back into the earth, not burying it deep, just enough to keep it where it belonged. His hands moved with quiet precision, covering it with soil, pressing it down, restoring the surface until there was no sign anything had ever been there. He brushed his palms together once, dust falling away in the light. For a moment, he stayed crouched, his hand resting flat against the ground, feeling the warmth rising through it. Then he stood. The wind moved through the grass again, slower now, calmer, like it had settled too. Marcus turned back toward the house, but before he reached the steps, he stopped. His head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to focus on something far beyond the visible line of the land. There was no sound this time, no engines, no movement that anyone else would notice. But he felt it, a presence, distant but deliberate, like something watching without needing to be seen. His expression did not change. He did not reach for anything. He simply stood there, letting the moment pass through him, measuring it in a way only he could. After a second, he exhaled quietly and continued toward the porch, each step steady, unchanged. Inside, the house welcomed him back with the same quiet it always had, but now it carried something else too, something just beneath the surface, waiting. Marcus paused at the doorway, glancing once more over his shoulder at the land, the horizon stretching wide under the clear sky. Nothing moved. Nothing needed to. He stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. The latch clicked into place, soft but certain. And for the first time that morning, the quiet did not feel like an end or a beginning. It felt like a warning that had not yet revealed itself. The house held its quiet like a breath that had not been released yet. Marcus stood just inside the doorway, his hand still resting lightly against the wood, feeling the faint vibration that most people would have missed. It was not sound. Not exactly. More like a shift in pressure, subtle, controlled, deliberate. He did not turn immediately. Instead, his eyes moved across the room once more, slow and measured, confirming what had not changed before focusing on what had. The old clock still ticked. The light still moved across the floor in steady inches. But beneath it, something else had settled in, something quieter than silence. Marcus stepped forward, his boots pressing into the floor with the same grounded rhythm, and moved toward the window. He did not pull the curtain back fully, just enough to see the edge of the land, the stretch where the grass met the horizon. Nothing moved. No trucks. No dust. No shadows crossing the sky. And yet, the feeling remained. He watched for a long second, then another, not searching, not reacting, just observing. The kind of stillness that did not come from calm, but from control. His reflection caught faintly in the glass, overlapping with the land beyond, two images held in the same frame. Then he stepped back. The moment passed, but not entirely. He turned toward the counter again, picking up the phone, the screen still dark, but his grip firm now, intentional. He did not dial. He did not check for missed calls. He simply held it, as if the weight of it confirmed something already decided. Outside, the wind shifted direction, brushing against the side of the house, carrying a faint sound that barely reached the ear but settled somewhere deeper. Not mechanical, not natural either. Just there. Marcus set the phone down again and moved toward the back room, a space smaller, quieter, where the walls held less light and more memory. A narrow shelf ran along one side, holding a few items placed with care, not decoration, but purpose. His hand reached for one of them, a folded piece of fabric, worn at the edges, the color faded but still recognizable. He held it for a second, then set it down again, exactly where it had been. The movement was not hesitation. It was confirmation. Back in the main room, the air felt tighter now, not suffocating, just focused. Marcus returned to the center of the space and stood still, listening again. This time, he caught it sooner. A faint shift outside. Not close. Not far. Just enough to register. His head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing just a fraction, aligning instinct with awareness. He moved toward the door again, slower this time, each step deliberate, controlled. His hand reached for the handle, but did not open it yet. Instead, he paused, letting the moment stretch, measuring it against everything he had already seen that morning. The carved post outside, the empty horizon, the absence that felt too intentional. His grip tightened slightly on the handle, not from tension, but readiness. Then he opened the door. The light hit first, bright and clear, followed by the same stretch of land, unchanged on the surface. But Marcus did not look at the ground this time. His gaze lifted just above it, scanning the space where movement would not leave a mark. And there, barely visible, just at the edge of perception, something shifted. Not a person, not a vehicle, just a presence aligning itself with the land in a way that did not belong. Marcus stepped out onto the porch, the wood settling beneath his weight, and for the first time since the trucks had left, his posture adjusted, not defensive, not aggressive, but aware. The kind of awareness that did not come from surprise. It came from recognition. And this time, he did not look away. The presence did not rush forward. It did not reveal itself in any obvious way. It simply held its place, just beyond the edge of certainty, like it had been there long before Marcus stepped outside and would remain long after. The wind moved again, brushing past his shoulders, carrying no sound, no signal, just air crossing open land. Marcus stood still on the porch, his weight evenly balanced, his eyes fixed on that subtle shift in the distance. Most would have missed it. Most would have dismissed it as heat-bending light, as movement where there was none. But he did not. He had seen patterns like this before, not in this place, not on this land, but in spaces where nothing was supposed to be visible until it was too late. His fingers rested lightly against the porch railing, the wood warm under the rising sun, grounding him to something real while everything else blurred at the edges. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, slowly, the shape in the distance adjusted, not stepping forward, not retreating, just aligning, like it was acknowledging that it had been seen. Marcus exhaled once, quiet, controlled. "You are not Voss," he said, not loud, not confrontational, just certain. The words carried across the open air, not expecting a reply, but making space for one. For a second, nothing answered. Then the shift came again, slightly closer now, still indistinct, but present in a way that could not be ignored anymore. A voice followed, not raised, not amplified, but clear, steady, as if distance did not matter. "No," it said. Marcus did not move. His gaze remained locked on the source, his posture unchanged. "I did not think so," he replied. Another pause stretched between them, longer this time, filled only by the quiet rhythm of wind across the grass. The voice came again, measured, deliberate. "You were supposed to leave after the first offer." Marcus gave the smallest shake of his head, almost to himself. That was never going to happen. The answer settled into the space between them without resistance. The presence shifted once more, closing the distance just enough to define its outline, still far, still controlled, but no longer hidden behind illusion. A single figure, standing where the land dipped slightly before rising again, positioned with intention. Not aggressive, not passive, just placed. "You understand what this land is," the voice continued. Marcus's eyes flicked once toward the horizon, then back. "I understand enough." The figure held still, as if weighing that response, then spoke again. "Then you understand why it cannot remain with you." The words did not carry threat. They carried expectation. Marcus leaned slightly against the railing, not in surrender, not in ease, just settling into his stance. "It already has," he said. Another silence followed, heavier now, not empty, but filled with the recognition that neither side was going to move the way the other wanted. The figure in the distance shifted again, this time turning slightly, as if looking across the land itself, taking in the acres, the house, the space that had just resisted more than it should have. "This place was never meant to be permanent," the voice said. Marcus's expression did not change, but something deeper in his posture anchored further. "Neither was I," he replied quietly. The wind passed between them again, carrying nothing but distance. The figure stood still for a long second, then another, before finally speaking once more. "You will be contacted again." It was not a warning, not a promise, just a statement placed where it could not be ignored. Marcus nodded once, small, controlled, as if accepting something he had already expected. "I will be here," he said. The figure did not respond this time. It simply shifted back, not disappearing, not retreating fully, but fading just enough to become part of the land again, indistinguishable from the horizon that held it. Marcus remained on the porch, his hand still resting against the railing, his eyes fixed on the space where the presence had been. The land stretched out in front of him, unchanged to anyone else, but not to him. And in that quiet, the realization settled, not sudden, not dramatic, just clear. What came next would not arrive with noise or numbers. It would arrive the same way this did. Quiet, precise, and already in motion. The horizon did not return to normal. It only looked that way. Marcus remained on the porch long after the figure had faded, his eyes fixed on the exact point where it had stood, as if the land itself might repeat what it had just revealed. The wind passed again, softer now, carrying the dry scent of earth and something else beneath it, something faint but deliberate, like a signal that had not fully ended. He did not chase it. He did not step forward. Instead, he let the stillness settle around him, measuring it the same way he had measured everything else that morning. Quiet did not mean empty. It never had. Slowly, his hand lifted from the railing, fingers curling once before relaxing again, a small release that did not show on his face. Then he turned and stepped back inside. The door closed behind him with a soft click, sealing the outside into distance, but not removing it. Inside, the air felt tighter again, not oppressive, just focused, like the house itself understood that something had shifted beyond its walls. Marcus moved through the room without hesitation, his path direct, purposeful now. The metal box was no longer on the table, no longer visible, but its absence was not empty. It was placed. Intentional. He stopped near the window again, this time not looking out immediately. His reflection met him first, steady, unchanged, but the weight behind it had deepened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the phone, holding it for a second before activating the screen. No missed calls. No messages. That was expected. Whatever came next would not announce itself twice. He set the phone down again, but closer this time, within reach. Outside, a faint shift crossed the land again, not visible in motion, but present in feeling, like something repositioning without needing to be seen. Marcus finally looked out, not scanning wide this time, but narrowing his focus to the same line, the same invisible boundary where presence had revealed itself before. Nothing moved, but the absence felt too precise to be natural. He nodded once, almost imperceptible, acknowledging it without reacting. Then he stepped away. The room behind him remained quiet, unchanged in structure, but altered in meaning. He moved toward the back again, stopping at the narrow shelf where the folded fabric rested. This time he picked it up. The material unfolded slowly in his hands, revealing worn stitching, faded color, and a pattern that spoke of time rather than design. He held it for a second longer than before, then draped it carefully over the back of the chair near the door. Not display, not decoration, placement, a signal, but only to those who understood it. He stepped back, eyes moving over the room once more, aligning each object, each detail, until everything sat exactly where it needed to be. No excess, no gaps. Outside, the wind stilled for a moment, the kind of pause that made everything feel suspended. Then, faintly, barely audible, something shifted again across the land, not closer, not farther, just different. Marcus did not return to the window. He did not open the door. Instead, he stood where he was, still, grounded, the same posture he had held since the first truck arrived, but now anchored to something deeper. His voice, when it came, was quiet, not directed outward, but it carried anyway. "You do not need numbers," he said softly. "You need reasons." The room did not answer. The land did not respond. But the silence that followed felt less empty than before, like something had heard it, processed it, and chosen not to reply. Marcus remained there for a long second, then another, before finally reaching for the chair, adjusting it just slightly so it faced the door, not the window. A small change. Intentional. Then he stepped back, letting the space settle into its new alignment. Outside, the horizon held steady, unchanged to anyone passing by, but beneath it, something continued to move, quiet, precise, already adapting. And this time, Marcus did not wait for it to reveal itself again. He was already ready for when it did. The room did not change, but the weight inside it did. It settled deeper, quieter, like something had finally chosen its place. Marcus stood near the chair he had just aligned, his eyes moving once across the space, not searching, just confirming. The fabric draped over the back caught a narrow line of sunlight, its worn threads holding the light longer than they should have, as if they carried something beyond the moment. He did not touch it again. It was already where it needed to be. Outside, the wind returned, softer now, brushing against the walls in a slow, steady rhythm that matched the quiet inside. Marcus turned toward the window once more, but this time he did not step closer. He stayed where he was, letting the distance remain, understanding that whatever waited beyond it did not require proximity to act. His gaze lifted slightly, not to the horizon itself, but just above it, to the space where movement had never been visible, only felt. The stillness held for a second longer than before, then shifted. Not in motion, not in form, but in intention. It was enough. Marcus exhaled quietly, the breath measured, controlled, then moved toward the table again. His hand rested briefly on the surface where the metal box had been, the absence now more present than the object itself. He did not need to see it. He knew exactly where it was. His fingers tapped once against the wood, a small, deliberate motion, like closing a thought. Then he turned away. The phone on the counter lit up again, not with a call, but with a single line of text that appeared without sound. Marcus did not rush to it. He walked over at the same steady pace, picked it up, and read the message without expression. No sender, no signature, just words placed exactly where they needed to be. You were not supposed to stay. He held the screen for a second longer, then set the phone back down, the light fading as quickly as it had come. His eyes lifted toward the door, not in reaction, but in acknowledgement. The message had not changed anything. It had only confirmed it. Outside, the land remained still, But beneath that stillness, something adjusted again, quieter than before, more precise. Marcus stepped toward the door, his hand finding the handle without hesitation, but he did not open it. Instead, he stood there, listening, feeling the alignment of everything around him. The house, the land, the silence. All of it had shifted into something new, something that no longer waited for permission. He spoke then, not loud, not directed, but the words carried anyway. I was not supposed to leave. The sentence settled into the space, not as defiance, but as truth. The wind outside paused, just for a moment, as if acknowledging the difference. Then it moved again, slower, steadier, carrying the same quiet across the land. Marcus released the handle and stepped back, turning away from the door without opening it. There was nothing out there that needed to be faced directly. Not yet. Instead, he returned to the center of the room, standing where everything aligned, where the chair faced the door and the window held the horizon at a distance. His posture remained the same, grounded, unchanged, but the intention behind it had sharpened. He was not waiting anymore. He was holding. And outside, just beyond what could be seen, the presence that had revealed itself earlier did not disappear this time. It remained, steady, patient, adjusting in ways that mirrored his own stillness. Neither moved forward. Neither stepped back. The space between them held, not empty, but full of something neither side needed to name. And in that balance, the realization settled deeper than before. This was not about ownership, not about control. It was about who understood what the land carried, and who was willing to stand long enough to protect it. Marcus did not shift his stance. He did not reach for anything. He simply stood there, steady as the ground beneath him, as the light slowly moved across the floor, marking time without changing anything that mattered. The light shifted slowly across the floor, stretching longer now, softer, the kind of light that did not demand attention but changed everything it touched. Marcus stood where he had been, unmoving, his presence as steady as the ground beneath him. The room held its shape around him, each object placed with intention, each line aligned to something unseen but understood. The chair faced the door. The window held the horizon at a distance. The fabric rested where it had been set, catching the last edge of sun before it slipped away. Outside, the wind moved again, quieter than before, almost careful, as if it had learned the boundaries of this place. The land stretched out the same as it always had, dry and wide, nothing marking what had happened there, nothing revealing what it held. But Marcus knew. He did not need to see it again. He did not need to check. His hand lifted slightly, then settled back at his side, a small motion that carried no tension, no uncertainty, just decision. The phone remained still on the counter, dark, silent, no new messages, no calls. Whatever needed to be said had already been said. Whatever needed to be known had already been understood. Marcus took a slow step forward, then another, moving toward the door not with urgency, not with hesitation, but with quiet purpose. His hand reached the handle, resting there for a second, feeling the cool metal beneath his palm. This time, he opened it. The door swung outward without resistance, the hinges soft, familiar. The air outside met him immediately, warm, steady, carrying the scent of sun and dust, and something deeper beneath it, something that had not left. He stepped onto the porch, the wood settling under his weight, the same sound as before, unchanged. The horizon stretched wide in front of him, clear, empty, holding nothing that could be seen. But the absence was precise, intentional. Marcus did not scan. He did not search. He simply looked. For a long second, nothing moved. Then, faintly, at the very edge of distance, something aligned again. Not stepping forward. Not revealing more. Just present. The same presence. Still there. Still waiting. Marcus's expression did not change. His posture remained steady, grounded, anchored in a way that did not require force. He did not speak this time. He did not need to. The understanding between them had already been set. The wind passed between them once more, slower now. Almost still, carrying nothing but space. The land did not shift. The house did not creak. Everything held. Marcus took one step forward onto the edge of the porch, stopping just before the first plank met the dirt. He did not cross it. Not yet. His hand lowered to his side, fingers relaxed, open. The distance between him and the unseen figure remained unchanged, but it no longer felt like separation. It felt like balance. Time moved without marking itself, the light fading inch by inch, the sky softening toward evening. The presence did not leave. Marcus did not turn away. Neither advanced. Neither retreated. And in that stillness, something settled, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. This was not a battle, not a negotiation, not something that would end with a single moment. It was something else entirely, something that would continue as long as it needed to. Marcus exhaled once, slow, controlled, the breath steady in the quiet air. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, not in agreement, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. The land beneath him did not belong to him. It never had, but he understood it, and that was enough. He turned slightly, not leaving the porch, not breaking the line, just shifting his stance to face both the house and the horizon at once. A position that did not give anything away. A position that held. The wind passed again, carrying the last light across the ground, and the moment settled into something final without ending. Marcus remained there, still, present, unchanged. And somewhere beyond what could be seen, the presence remained as well, equally still, equally certain. Neither moved. Neither needed to. And the land, quiet and endless, held them both without choosing a side.